If you've heard the phrase, actions speak louder than words, in many ways you can understand and attribute that to St. Anthony of Padua. He has a little part of his writing is he's exhorting all Christians to pay attention to not just what we say, but what we do. Now, the next part of what he says, I think, is also helpful. So he says, actions speak louder than words. Let your words teach and your actions preach. So that works for us, but then there's God. We heard in the first reading, they're in the midst of a 7-year drought. And Elijah's having this interaction with this young man, and he says, go look at the horizon and see if there's any rain clouds that are developing. God's promised his action. I'm sorry, it was a 3-year drought. And he had to look 7 times. Well, doesn't the same principle apply to God? Shouldn't his actions speak louder than words? Shouldn't his promises be manifest by his works? Well, God's going to do what God's going to do in God's time. And one of the actions that we perform is to do a lot of work, paying attention and noticing what God is doing and when he's doing it. Not only in our own hearts, but in the hearts of others and in our entire world. And the more that we're clear about what God is doing, the more we're able to imitate his actions and certainly express those in our words and teaching, but then our actions can be conformed and aligned to what God's actions are. And that can be our preaching. It does take a lot of work. Prayer is a daily occurrence, not just 7 times and you're done. It takes a lot of work to observe, to listen, to pay attention. That's work. That's an action in itself. And it's one of the great things that we preach to others is how much effort we put into really noticing what God is doing in our lives. It seems so passive. It seems like we're not doing much, but we are. And the more we do that in our prayer, and sometimes the greatest action we have is we're waiting or we're just not acting in that moment. And that's a decision, that's an action, if you will, in itself. Because we want to make sure we're doing things that God is showing us to do, things we can imitate that God is doing, and in God's time. So there's a lot of great wisdom from our scriptures and from St. Anthony himself that's instructive to us, that to make sure that, yes, our actions should speak louder than our words, but our actions should be aligned to God's actions. And then our words can teach, and our actions can preach.